Hello and welcome to episode 4 of STILLWOOD on Location. Now when I started doing these episodes, I wanted to show you guys the more unknown places around camp. So this episode is going to be a little bit different. Now it's going to be different because I'm going to try and show you guys something that's hiding in plain sight. I'm talking about stumps. Big stumps. They're all over Stillwood. Have you guys ever noticed actually how many stumps there are around Stillwood? Now, not all of these are just normal stumps. In fact, most of them are something that we call nurse stumps. Nurse stumps are when a stump, as it decomposes, provides the special nutrients and protection that are perfect for allowing new trees and new seedlings to take root and grow. Behind me here, you can't quite see them all, but there's a bunch of them. There are 4 nurse stumps supporting as many as 10 trees. Now in front of me, just on the other side of the camera, I couldn't quite fit them in. There are 2 more nurse stumps supporting upwards of 6 other trees. And so they're really cool, but they're not just here. They're all around camp. Like here. And here. Dogwood's got them. So does chestnut and almond. They're here too. Hey guys. I was walking to the amphitheater, and you're never going to believe what I found. Check it out. A nurse stump. And here's a... Wait a second. That's not a nurse stump. That's a nurse log. Okay, I think we can establish the fact that I've proven there are a lot of nurse stumps around Stillwood. The camera is currently propped up on one in the immediate vicinity outside the frame of view of the camera. There are 7 more nurse stumps, so there are a ton of them. Nurse logs as well. And I thought I would land on my favorite tree in Stillwood, which also happens to be a nurse stump. It's right here behind me. As you can see, the tree has broken off about 12 feet above the ground, and a tree started growing there. And as the tree grew, the roots, the stump underneath it has started to deteriorate and go away, and the roots are now what is beginning to stabilize it the most. And so I think it's just a really neat, cool tree that starts about 12 feet up in the air. Now, I just really love nurse stumps in general. I think it's such a cool contrast between life and death. On the one hand, directly underneath it, it's such an obvious evidence of something that existed and no longer does. It died. And on top, such an obvious existence of something that is new and living and growing. So I think it's just a really cool contrast. I've always loved contrasts like that. And we actually also see a lot of contrast imagery in Scripture as well. Things like night versus day, light versus dark, physical versus spiritual, and of course, life versus death. And one of the passages that we read about in Scripture talks about for a seed to grow, it must first die. Now we know that the physiology of plants is a little different, a little bit more complicated than that. The seed doesn't actually die, but the fact remains that for the seed to exist as something else, for it to grow onto whatever it's supposed to grow onto, it must no longer exist. It must become something else. When it has grown and become what it's supposed to be, the seed is no longer there. It is gone. And the same thing happens when we begin to believe in Jesus, when we believe who he says he is, and when we begin to live our lives in accordance to the way that he has designed for us. Our old self ceases to exist. It dies, and we become something new. We become alive in something else. Now, this goes beyond just what we do, what it looks like, what we do. The change is holistic. We think differently, we feel differently, and we do things differently. And when we live in accordance with that lifestyle, when we start to live in that way as we pursue Jesus in a relationship with him, we begin to become the person that he created us to be, which is ultimately the best design for us. And it's when we live that way that we find the most joy, we find the most fulfillment. It's not necessarily an easier life. A lot of the times we find, you can read it all throughout history, that when people become Christians, life gets harder. But it does become the most joy-filled part and way that we can live. So let's continue to think about that as you go on a hike in the future or come up to Stillwood again, anything like that, a park or something like that. Take a look around, see if you can find some nurse stumps or nurse logs. And when you do, remember, remember the difference between life and death, but not just physical life and death, but the life that we can experience through Christ, which is just something so cool and so exciting. All right, well, take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.